And I was a little distressed about this because, first of all, I didn't relish the thought of walking back through those streets barefoot. But also, this was a nice pair of Timberland hiking shoes that was one of 3 pairs of shoes I was carrying around the world with me. And I used them for a lot of hikes, and I was going to use them for months and months still. And I was going to have to pay a lot of money to replace those shoes. And back at that time, when I had more hair, you could not buy Timberlands in India for any amount of money because they just didn't have them. So we came up with a plan. My wife walked around and started looking at people's bags and their shoes, and I tore off down those ramparts to find the person who stole my shoes. And as you can see, it's a pretty long way down to the bottom, and I was starting to give up hope. But when I got down near the bottom where that gate is, there was a kid of about 15 strolling along with my shoes on. So I grabbed him, pushed him up against the wall, and said a few expletives and give me my shoes. And he looked freaked out and didn't understand a word I was saying. And even with a bit of pantomiming, the point didn't get across that he had my shoes and I wanted them back. He probably thought there's no way I could have gotten from the top of that fort down to where he was in that amount of time, but I was racing. So after a few more shouts and bewildered looks on his face, I found a policeman nearby with a big bamboo stick, and I brought the policeman over, explained what happened, pointed to my bare feet, pointed to the other shoes, and he got the message and asked the young boy something, which was probably, "Hey, where'd you get those shoes?" And didn't like the answer because he went whack on the kid's shoulder. And then he asked him another question, which was probably, "Where did you find those?" And the kid probably said, "Beside the road," or something. And he whack hit him again. But finally, the kid, it registered. He took off the shoes, gave them back to me. I kneeled down, started lacing them up. The policeman led the kid off to somewhere, his office probably. I walked all the way back up to the top, very happy, beaming. Said, "Look, I got my shoes back." And I did not have to walk through those streets in my bare feet, and I continued the next 5 months of my journey with my shoes back on. My name is Tim Leffel. I run 5 different websites. One of them is called Perceptive Travel, and it's all narrative stories from book authors. We've won over 40 Best Travel Writing Awards, and SATW named it the best travel blog in North America a few years ago. And you're probably not going to remember any of the things I just said, but you will remember that story. You will probably think about it if you ever go to Jodhpur. You might even think about it the next time you go in a temple and you have to take off your shoes. You might tuck them behind somebody else's because you're worried that you might not get them back. And that's the power of storytelling. So what is a story? Well, this is what they teach you in class. You need all these things to have a good story. And the problem with a lot of travel articles and travel websites is you never get past those first 2 things. It's all about the place, and if it's a self-obsessed writer, maybe it's all about them, but there's not much else beyond that as far as plot, conflict, and resolution. But if you do have all those things, you can have a franchise that goes on for decades and keeps spinning and spinning and spinning. Or you can have something more modest. A good story doesn't have to involve 50 characters and lots of special effects. It could be something simpler, like trying to find a toilet. But a really good story makes you care. It makes you feel something. It's not just a plot. It's characters you care about. It's a conflict you care about, and you want to root for someone to get through that. You want to know more. These are snippets of conversations I've heard or had the last few days. When you look at any of these, you got questions, right? You want to know why or what? What comes next? How did that happen? I especially like the third one because she was on the pill. So it's going to be a good story if that keeps going. These are all movies that have been made 4, 5, 6, 10 times. Even though we know how it's going to end, we still care. We still watch them. Even when they come out in a different language, in a different name, which is what the Seven Samurais became, the Magnificent Seven. And of course, there are stories that have been around for 10,000 years that we keep telling over and over and over again, and they even become sort of a compass for our lives in some cases. And these stories get reused too. Jesus is the reluctant hero, which is also the character you get with Star Wars or Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, all kinds of books, The Matrix. And of course, a good story can make people go into battle to fight for their freedom. Anybody seen The Darkest Hour, the Winston Churchill movie? It's really good. And the very last line of the movie is, he summoned the English language and sent it into battle. And that's the thing you can do with language. You can send it into battle. You can inspire people to do all kinds of things. Anybody know who this is? Wow. All right, so he's the founder of Oberoi Hotels. And I thought I would have got somebody in here. If you ever stay at an Oberoi hotel, ask an employee for his story, the founder's story. Anybody can tell you. I don't care if it's your maid, it's your waiter, it's the general manager. They all know the story by heart. And it's one of those typical rags to riches stories about a man who had very little money. His father died young, went to work for a hotel, worked his way up, became eventually the owner of this huge empire. And that's an inspiring story. The people that work there, they feel a sense of pride because of that story. If it was just some giant corporation that opened a bunch of hotels, who cares? And of course, I wanted a local example. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this company, Sherpa Adventure Gear, but they are far and away the best gear example you can find besides maybe Patagonia in the US as far as having a great story. This is the homepage of their website. It's not a jacket, it's not pants. You go on their website, it's all about Nepal. You hear stories about the people that work on this stuff, what this company has done for the local villages, and it's really inspiring, and it makes you want to buy their clothes because you care about the story. Another local example, if any of you have ever stayed at the Yak and Yeti, it's a hotel here with a very long history, and it's a great history. It's a great story, a very weird, unlikely story. So check it out sometime. This is on their page, if you go to their About page. It's not just, our rooms are nice and they have plush bedding. It's about the whole history behind the place. So the whole key here is to make an emotional connection. This is not manipulative, it's just appealing to what is already in our DNA. We've been telling stories for longer than we've been writing. We've been telling stories from as soon as we had language. And so it resonates with us, it means something to us. So this is an industry related slide here, but if you're a tour company, for example, don't spend 10 pages telling us about your new kayaks and how experienced your guides are and the fact you started 20 years ago. Tell us the story of how you started 20 years ago. What were you doing that led to this? It doesn't, if you tell us you have great customer service, big deal. So everybody says that. It's sort of a given. What you are selling, what people pay thousands of dollars for, is memories. They want to know, what kind of great experiences am I going to have? What kind of things are you going to show me that I can't see at home? What can I do with you that I can't do at home? And the same if you're a blogger writing a story. This relates to us too. You don't want to just tell people, here's what you'll see, here's what you'll do. Give them a sense of how it's going to feel. We call these table stakes. It comes from poker. If you're coming up to the table, you have to have a certain amount of money to play, to enter the poker game. So those are table stakes. Your good equipment, your safety record, your certifications, what organizations you belong to, what your guides have done, all of that stuff is just what you need to even be in business, to be in the game. this is what you're really selling. These are all actually pictures from last year's HTM for people that went on fam trips. But you're selling this feeling you get when you're sitting there looking at these beautiful mountains, or you're looking at the roofs of this village, or when you're seeing a rickshaw driver, with his rig all dressed up. That's something we are not going to see where we live. And so we're willing to pay a lot of money for that because it makes us feel something. We want to know the story behind all of this. So I'm just going to let this play for a second. This is another great example. If you go to Mountain Lodges of Peru, it's a company in Peru that does lodge-to-lodge treks. I know you have something very similar here with Everest Lodges where people can go trek for the day, then they spend the night, then they trek to the next place. But if you go on their site, there's very little about the lodges. There's very little about the actual tours, even though they're really nice. And what they keep emphasizing is you are here to see a culture. You're here to be with the descendants of the Incas. You're here to be with the people that have been farming on this land for hundreds and hundreds of years. This is the birthplace of the potato. I mean, that's what they're talking about here. They've kept these same varieties going for a millennia, and they still plant them in a traditional way. And when you go on a tour with them, this is what you're going to experience, and this is what you're going to remember. You're not going to remember all the stats about how long they've been in business, or where their guide went to school, or anything like that. You're going to remember how this made you feel, how this woman made you feel. And these people dress like this. They're not doing this for tourists. This is their culture. And you've got a lot of this in Nepal where you can tell this kind of story. It's not just about, we have the highest mountains in the world. Big deal. I mean, that's nice, but if we're a tourist doing a hike, what do we care whether a mountain's 7,000 meters or 8,000 meters? It doesn't really matter. We want to see something beautiful. We want to learn about the culture. We want to have an experience that we're really going to remember for a lifetime and share with all of our friends. And this company did something really interesting where they came into a village and they built a hotel. And usually that would be a very exploitative relationship, and this is our hotel and there's you, the village, and maybe you can come work for us. But what they did is built up an equity stake where the villagers get 25% of all the earnings. So now they've got a stake in it. And also the villagers wanted to wear their traditional clothing when they worked there. They didn't want to wear some hotel uniform. And so it's very incorporated, and now they feel ownership and they feel like they're a part of it, and that's a fantastic story. That's so much better than we have heavenly beds and nice sheets and whatever. So if you have a good story, you can stand apart. You can't stand apart just by talking about the table stakes things. And also, if you're a blogger, you can't win by just doing another story on the top 5 things to see in Bhutan. That might get you some search traffic, might get you hits on your website. But if that's all you do all the time, then that's not going to be something that's going to help you stand out. You're going to need to talk about the story behind those places. And also, it doesn't pay to be conservative. If you tell us that you have something for everyone, that really means you're not for anybody. And I actually got an email before this conference of somebody wanting to meet an operator here, and said, we specialize in serving millennials, Generation X, solo travelers, groups, families, FITs, and baby boomers. You don't specialize if you're going to list 7 things. What are you about? What do you do better than anybody else? Tell us a story. So sometimes people say, well, where do I start? I don't think our company has much of a story. Well, it does if you put a little work into it. Where do you go? What do you do when you're out? What are the people like that live there? What stories do they have? What about your guys, the people that work for you? We talked about yesterday empowering your employees and giving them respect, making them feel like they're wanted there. They have stories too. There's plenty of things you can mine to tell a story. It doesn't have to be your founder necessarily, but that's a good one too if you've got it. What's the history of that place? What do people make there? I don't know. I've done 2 treks here. I haven't learned anything about what people actually make in those villages because the guide never told me. I went rafting here recently, and when we pointed out all the trash on the ground, the guide said, yes, there's a lot of trash in Nepal. And that was the end of the discussion. Now, he could have told a story about what that company's doing about it, or how they're lobbying the government to do something about it. There could be a story there easily, and there could have been a lot more for me to write about instead of, oh, there's a lot of garbage beside the river. So think about what you can go into that's beyond just what's on the surface. This is something really fun if you have some time to kill. This is the URL here at the top, but this is a periodic table of story elements. And you can't tell from this, but it's interactive. So at the bottom they have various movies listed like WALL-E or Monsters Inc. or whatever, or Star Wars. And they tell you which of these elements have gone into each story. And it's really terrific if you're looking for ideas. But you can see here under heroes, it's got the knight in shining armor, the badass bookworm, the technical pacifist, anti-hero. And then you've got under villains, the amoral attorney, the chess master, obstructive bureaucrat. Any movie out there, you can find the elements, and this thing's really fun to go through and just dissect what you're looking at. And then you can also use this for ideas. You may think, well, how can I talk about this in a story about travel? But there are villains in a lot of stories. We've been talking about them the past 2 days. There are villains in the government. There are villains in our modern world in terms of the trash we're throwing, the pollution we're putting out, all those things. So I run a influencer network. We don't like that name. We keep talking about this, but there's no other better alternative. So I say we're a group of publishers and bloggers. We worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car and Trivago and Expedia, big companies like that. But we've also done some tourism campaigns. And when we worked with Texas, they said, we want your bloggers to talk about things that nobody else is writing about. And we said, perfect. That's exactly what we would like to do. And so we talked about wine in Texas and arts in Texas and things like that. Not the basic boring stuff, but we went out and found some stories to talk about. The Chisholm Trail, which is how people used to drive cattle south in the old days. There's so many great stories from every place around. And then you guys know Matt, who's here. He runs Upthink. He did a big campaign with Kyrgyzstan tourism, which nobody's heard of Kyrgyzstan. Nobody can find it on a map. Nobody can spell it. But I think after 80 blog posts and dozens of videos going up, a lot more people want to go there now. But you can see just the variety of stories. This is just a small sampling that can come out of one place if you really put some effort into it. So why does this matter? Well, this is, again, geared to industry, but who wants to hear your story? Well, of course we want to hear it. We're writers. We want to hear something beyond just, you're going to go rafting and go over some rapids. Well, nice. I can do that in 40 other places around the world, and I have. Tell me what's different about doing it here. What's different about the culture? What's the deal with these little cable things that go across the river, You've got stories to tell if you just spend a little time digging them up and sharing them. So journalists, bloggers, editors, we all want to hear a story. If you tell us, we've been in business for 25 years, we've got the best kayaks, and our guides are really well certified. Well, okay, that's a sentence or two. We need a story. Your customers care. What sets you apart from everybody else? They're going to remember the stories far longer than they're going to remember the technical facts. And the same with your employees. They want to work for an interesting company, with interesting people. And your partners care. Anybody that's investing in you. They want to. If you've ever watched that American show Shark Tank, people come on and pitch their company and try to get investors. And the story is so much more important than just how much money have you got. Because if there's a good story, they know they can market that. So I'm going to leave you with this one. I'm done, but this is another video. Was paid for by Tierra del Fuego Tourism, but you'll only hear them mentioned once in the entire video. It's all about the story.
A las comunidades modernas, a pesar de que no son tantas acá en la zona, pero no quieren ir a donde no hay.
But it's so good on so many levels. If you guys got any questions, shout out. Otherwise, I'm going to hand this over to to the next person.
Tim, please do remain on stage. I'd like to invite Mr. Deepak Raj. We'll do questions afterwards because we're staying on time.
Okay.
I'd like to invite Mr. Deepak Raj Joshi, the CEO of NTB, on stage to help present the token of love. Big round of applause again for Mr. Tim Leffel.